Look what I got. It's a vanishing point hand. And today we're going to have a fountain pen shootout. And today we'll have a look at two pens that are a little special. They're fountain pens, but they have vanishing points. Retractable nibs. There's one, and there's the other. So, what I've got here is, and both of them are actually nice and black, so they make for nice comparison material. First of all, what I have is a Pilot vanishing point. I think it's also known as an Amici vanishing point. It's known as a Pilot capless. There's a whole lot of variations of the name. This is the pen. The pen, this is the black stealth version. And the funny thing about this pen is that it has a mechanism we mainly associate with ballpoint pens, right? You see this button right there? If I push that, the nib comes out, which is quite nice. It's very practical. You can operate this pen with one hand. It even has a clip, which is very cool. You put it in your shirt pocket, nib up. That's the way this pen's designed. You take it out, and with one hand, you can operate it. Try to do something like that with an AHAB. For example, I'm not bashing the AHAB, but I mean pens like this. You take them out of your shirt pocket. You would have to twist them, and then the cap falls off, and there's a lot of issues with that. Slip caps, of course, are a little easier, but even then, it's kind of awkward. And with these pens, bam, and you can write. So that's very, very cool. Okay, that's one. The other one is a Lamy Dialogue 3. This pen I would say is a bit of an acquired taste. Not everyone likes it. Some people think it's like a baseball bat. Well, it's not a small pen. I mean, it's fairly big, and it's heavy, and it's wide. It's got some girth to it. This pen is not operated by clicking a button. This pen is operated by doing a twist. You see these little lines right there? Well, if you twist those, you see if you twist the barrel, the nib just pops out. So again, in this case, you take it out of your shirt pocket. Again, nib up, it has a clip, and bam, it writes. Now, this bam is not as pronounced a bam as with the vanishing point, because the twisting is kind of the same as with a screw-on cap. I always twist it the wrong way around, sorry. So that's the action. It's interesting, and it works, but it's not as practical as a vanishing point. I mean, I can do this all day with one hand, it's no problem. This twisting action is a bit more elaborate. Okay, so what I want to do today is show you how to take the two pens apart. I want to do writing sample so that you get an idea of both pens. I have an oblique broad in the Dialogue 3 and a regular broad in the vanishing point, which was actually binderized. I got the nib from Richard Binder, and he binderized it, so it's tuned expertly. Whereas in the Dialogue 3 it's not tuned, but it writes well. So I think you can compare the two. I have separate reviews of these two pens on my channel, so if you want a lot of detail about either pen, I suggest you check those out. Today will be a little brief about the actual pens. I just want to compare them. So size-wise, actually, I expected the Dialogue 3 to be a bit bigger, and the vanishing point is, well, maybe just 1 or 2 millimeters taller, but it has that big knob at the end you push. If you operate that and you operate the Dialogue 3, then you see that there's actually quite a difference in the two pens. The Dialogue 3 has a much bigger nib than the vanishing point. You probably want to see a close-up of the two nibs, so I'll work on that. Maybe that's a little exaggerated for my camera. There we go. So they're nice nibs. For the truth of me, I've forgotten. Sorry, I'm working on something here. Here we got a loop, and here we have a Lamy nib. As you can see, it's 14 karat gold, 585 Lamy. I think you can actually take off this nib and put it on a Safari if you are particularly perverse. And here we have the nib on that vanishing point, which looks a lot simpler. Refocus, there we go. I've forgotten, is this, I believe this is a 14K nib. but it could be 18K as well. I'll check it when I take the two pens apart. So as you get the Dialog 3 has a clip that actually moves sort of into the barrel, not completely, but moves into the barrel when you operate the mechanism. So now it sticks out just a bit further. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but it just moves a bit. Both clips function well. The Lamy, the Dialog 3 seems to have a clip that's actually spring-loaded, which is very useful if you don't want to tear off your shirt pocket. The VP, the Vanishing Point, does not have that, and it's a bit tighter, but I think it works well. The two, as I said, have this nice sort of matte black stealth coating, which I like a lot. And that's pretty much all there's to it. Now when it comes to weight, it's difficult to gauge. Let me just take out a scale. I've got the feeling the Dialog 3 is a bit heavier, but that may be a psychological effect because it's so bulky. Yeah, Dialog 3 is 50 grams, and the Vanishing Point is about 30. So that's definitely a lighter pen. Nice, interesting pens. I'll show you how to take them apart, and I'll do a writing sample, and that's all there's to it. So hope this was useful, and I'll see you later. Bye bye. Okay, so here we have it. Pilot Vanishing Point and Lamy Dialog 3. Let's have a look at this Vanishing Point first. It's very easy. You just unscrew the barrel, and I recommend you keep your hand here as a buffer, because there's actually a spring in there and this thing may fly off at some point. Okay, you just slide out the nib and feed unit. As you can see, it's right there. Here's the converter, very simple pilot converter, and here we have the nib and feed. Now you can take off the nib like that, but I really wouldn't recommend it, because this feed looks pretty thin, and you don't want to break that off, because then you need to buy a whole new unit. So that's what you've got going here. When you put it back in, it helps to put the nib end in first. You see this little knob that actually slides into that notch right there. Again, this is spring loaded, so be a little careful. You can actually launch the whole thing. And then you would put this back in place. And just screw it back in place. I'll leave it open because I have to ink it up in a second. Okay, the Dialog 3, if you screw it in one direction, the nib will pop out. If you screw it in the other direction, the barrel will come off. There is no spring-loaded stuff going on here, so you don't have to worry about parts of your pen flying away and shooting someone in the eye. You can unscrew this bit. You see there are screw threads right there. It has a nice grip. I like that, because this is pretty smooth stuff, but this is a really good grip you can use to unscrew it. The converter, you can just pull it out. As you can see, I'm running a little bit low on ink, but that's the ink I'll be using today. When you're done, I'm assuming you can slide this nib off should you want to do so, but because there's ink in there, I won't. Usually the easy thing to do is just take a bit of Scotch tape, put it on there, then you can just slide it off. And in principle you should be able to put this on a Safari too, as I said before. Okay. Oh, that's right, I would tell you, see, you can just screw it back in place. I will tell you about the nib, right? 18 karat. So the Vanishing Point has an 18 karat gold nib, which is then rhodium plated to make it look silvery, which goes nice with the black. Okay, I'll ink it up. Well, I don't have to show you how to ink this up, I suppose, but we're here now. Today we'll be using Mont Blanc Toffee Brown. I don't really like using colors like that for the shootouts, but because I already have that ink in the Dialog 3, I'll be using it here today. Yes, there's ink in there, great. I recommend taking out these nib units and ink those up directly, because, you know, there is a ball seal. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but there is a ball seal right there. Let me just put that in place. There we go. You see how that, I know this is not really focusing, but you see how that opens up and the nib comes out. Clearly you don't want it to get ink to get in there. And with the Vanishing Point, there is a type of seal too that will just open up and then the nib comes out. Again, you don't want to get ink in there, so that's why I would just take out the nib units and ink those up directly. Okay, there we go. Let's do a writing sum. Alright, so 2 pens. Let's start with the vanishing point. So we have a vanishing point, 18K broad nib. The ink is Mont Blanc Toffee Brown, as I've just shown you. And then we have a Lamy Dialogue 3. The nib is oblique broad. It's 14K. And it's a nib. Alright. Writing. I have noticed that the Dialogue 3 especially can get a little dry if you don't use it for a while. So that ball seal is not perfect. When I did my review I wasn't sure, but now I've used it for a bit longer and it's true. Okay, so it looks to me like the Vanishing Point nib is a little broader than the Lamy nib. Fascinating, because this is a Japanese pen, and usually, as I've said before, Japanese nibs tend to be one size smaller than their Western counterpart. So a Japanese broad would have a Western counterpart that's actually medium, I would say. No, the other way around. Now I'm getting confused. So in Japan, if you buy a fine, then in the West it would be an extra fine. That's what I'm trying to say. In Japan, if you would buy a broad, you would get a Western medium. Sorry, I was thinking too much. When I think too much, my brain shuts down. Okay, what about wetness? Well, there is no complaint on wetness in the Vanishing Point. Now I say again, Richard Binder tuned this nib when I bought it from him, so this was to be expected, that it's a nib that performs flawlessly. After all, the guy is a nib Meister of renown. Okay, then we have the Dialogue 3. Again, also quite wet. A nice even patch of ink. I didn't allow that to dry. As long as I allowed that to dry, it always looks to me like this pen makes the inks a little darker. I'm not sure whether you agree, but that's what I seem to get from this. Okay, what about some flexibility? Can we get some line variation? We can get some line variation from the Vanishing Point. What about the... I'd actually say this is a springier nib than the VP nib. It's also a bit bigger, and this one always seems to be almost hooded in the way it's constructed, so maybe that alters flexibility a bit, I'm not sure. Okay, well, so there you have it. Which is the better pen? I like them both. If you want absolute practicality, I think the Vanishing Point is the best choice because you can operate it so easily single-handedly. The Dialogue 3 is definitely there for people who like bigger, heavier pens. It's indeed a bit like writing with a telephone pole, but it's a very cool pen. A lot of nice design features like that clip that sort of moves away when you operate the nib mechanism. Both pens have their uses, I would say, and both pens are a bit different. So I hope this comparison has helped you decide if you were thinking about buying either. And that's all there's to it. I'll see you later. Bye bye.